Hi there, I'm Craig Taylor and I'm just putting this screencast together to give you perhaps a few pointers and a few guides about how you might be able to get started with mobile learning. Now that particular phrase, mobile learning, has sent a shudder down my spine, and I'll probably be able to explain why as we go through this screencast. But for the time being, so that you, dear viewer, dear listener, understand what this screencast is about, I'm going to term it mobile learning. So let's have a look. John Dewey, very famous American commentator, very famous American philosopher, said at the beginning of the 20th century that a society which is mobile, which is full of channels for the distribution of a change occurring anywhere, must see to it that its members are educated to personal initiative and adaptability. He said that at the beginning of the last century. He wasn't talking about mobile devices, he was talking about mobile societies. Three critical things that he said were: change. Well, since I've been alive, the way in which we connect, communicate and collaborate has changed dramatically. My son is 3.5 years old. Since he's been alive, the way in which we connect, communicate and collaborate and learn has changed dramatically as well. The iPad didn't exist when he was born, and now look where we are. He talks about initiative. He talks about people like you and me seizing the initiative, looking at how mobile devices can add benefits to what we do, can add benefit to our business, and take the initiative and do something about it. You're already doing that by sheer virtue that you're looking at this screencast. And finally, he talks about adaptability. I used to ask people whether or not they thought their learners were ready for mobile learning, but I've stopped doing that now because, in my opinion, most of them give the wrong answer. Most of them say no, they're not ready. I would actually say that our learners are streets ahead of us in terms of using their mobile devices. They use them to access train times, bus times, they use them to book holidays, they use them to check their bank accounts, they use them to communicate with friends and colleagues, they use them to figure out how much money they've got left in the bank. People are used to using their mobile devices to access information that is of use to them. What I would suggest is that we are actually behind the curve, and what we need to do is catch up and provide them with opportunities to access information that is of use to them for their work-related reasons as opposed to their personal or private lives. Quite a lot of what I'm going to talk about today has come from the JISC Mobile InfoKit, which reference the JISC Mobile and Wireless Technologies Review, a screenshot that you can see on the page here. I will reference a link to this at the end of the screencast in the show notes. But this review says two things really that really stick in my head. First of all, mobile learning is in its infancy. You could argue that mobile learning is actually as old as the hills. You know, we're used to walking and talking. We're used to being able to pick books up and move from A to B with them and read a long route and read at our destination. But in terms of the context about what we're talking about here with mobile learning is still relatively in its infancy. It also talks about the fact that mobile learning is extremely powerful, not because of the mobility of the device, but because of the mobility of the learner. For the learner to be able to access just-in-time contextualized information at the point of need, rather than receiving it 6 months before in a classroom completely out of context. The mobility of the learner is important, not the mobility of the device. I would also suggest personally, and this wasn't necessarily reflected in the JISC Mobile InfoKit, but if you are looking at introducing mobile technologies, think long and hard about whether you're going to implement a separate mobile learning strategy. My suggestion would actually be to incorporate it with whatever your current L&D strategy is. Now that seems like a common sense thing to do when you say it like that. However, how many organisations have a separate social media policy that is separate to their mobile and internet use policy? And yet it's the same thing really. So just think long and hard. If you're going to use mobile technologies, are you going to have a separate strategy? Maybe your business determines that you are and you've got no say in it. But I would question that, and I would suggest you push back, because otherwise what you could end up with is mobile learning being seen as something very different to good old-fashioned learning. And that's why I said at the beginning of this screencast that I'm not a big fan of the phrase mobile learning, because I think it separates things and it creates barriers and ring fences things. Listen to the feedback of your learners. Do they want mobile learning? Are they already using it? Well, we've already suggested that they are, probably not for work-related reasons. Would they be prepared in using their own mobile devices? Would they be prepared to use their own data plans? If they are, then great. If they're not, then obviously that's going to cause a problem. You need to provide other solutions to meet that problem. Listen to your learners, listen to what they have to say, look and listen to other organisations that have been successful or have been unsuccessful, and learn the lessons that they've already learned, perhaps the hard way. What is mobile learning? Well, that's entirely for you to decide, really. I know what there's several definitions of mobile learning out there. I'm not going to fall down in any particular one camp of them. It's up to you. What is mobile learning to you? What is mobile learning to your organisation? And actually, do you really want to consider it as being anything different to conventional, good old-fashioned learning, except that they're able to access the information and pass information through a slightly different route than normal? One of the challenges with using technology, particularly mobile technology, is the sheer rate at which it's developed over quite a short period of time. I already spoke about the fact that since I've been alive, we've seen a very different change from one phone to another phone, and yet look at just my son, 3.5 years old. Phone functionality has changed significantly since he's been alive. So one of the challenges with being able to adopt this in corporate environments is obviously good old-fashioned innovation prevention department. You might be calling it the IT department in your organisation. They're going to have real reservations about using mobile technology. I'm not saying that those reservations are unfounded. In fact, I think most of them are actually quite well recognised and are actually based in some form of logic for a change. But just be aware that that rate of change, coupled with good old-fashioned red tape, is likely to lead to you having some challenges with getting mobile learning into your organisation. That's why this is the first blog post in quite a few where I'm going to make suggestions about how you can get mobile learning in under the radar into your organisation and start to show the value of it without necessarily having to do it officially. So keep your eyes peeled for some future blog posts. Look upon mobile learning as a Trojan horse. Look upon it as a foot in the door. It's a significantly different way of doing things. That doesn't mean to say it's a bad thing. Think about the fact that if you can implement mobile learning at whatever level in your organisation, you have been successful in driving a different way of thinking in your organisation. You have exposed your learners to something that they perhaps haven't experienced from a work perspective before. Don't overlook even the small successes that you might have, because it is a Trojan horse approach and it will open the doors to other things. Simple diagram on the screen here, ranging from admin on the left hand side to some deep learning and teaching on the right hand side. Most of the quick wins come across the left hand side of the screen, and most of the perhaps more richer business value adding benefits come towards the right hand side of the screen, but they are harder to achieve. Look at the left hand side of the screen. Consider being able to log into your LMS and book onto a face-to-face course and receive joining instructions all from your mobile device. Nice, simple, easy, administrative process that you've undertaken from a mobile device whilst you're on the move. Look at the right hand side of the screen. Imagine going into a workplace or a work environment, being able to hold up a mobile device and move it around and see the people that work at each of those desks or each of those workstations or on each of those pieces of equipment actually talk back to you and say hi, and they're looking forward to meeting you. Imagine being able to see where the fire exits are or the fire extinguishers. Imagine being able to see who works in various offices and when they're on leave and what shift patterns they're on. Harder to achieve, but I would argue perhaps having some really deep, rich benefits from being able to do that in a work environment. The JISC Mobile InfoKit lists 5 quick wins, which I'm going to talk about now. I'd be very surprised if you personally, and even your organisations, aren't already doing some of these things, are already achieving some of the quick wins towards moving towards using mobile technologies. First of all, is your website mobile optimized? If it's not, why not? If it is, well done. You've already allowed people to look at content in an intelligent way, in an intuitive and user-friendly way from their mobile device. So double check whether or not your corporate website or your personal website is mobile optimized. If it is, are any of the RSS feeds that are hanging off that mobile optimized as well? If they're in your control, then why not check to make sure that they're mobile optimized too? If you're using social media, well then there's a very good chance that they're mobile optimized sites, but where they're not, of course, Many social media providers now provide mobile native apps to sit on your device to maximize the functionality of the device and to be able to allow you and your learners and your clients and your customers the ability to interact with you intuitively in a user-friendly way from a mobile device. Do you have a learning management system? If so, does it have a mobile option? Can you switch on the mobile functionality? If you can, is it switched on? If it's not, why isn't it switched on? Just think about these things. If you can access your mobile, your learning management system, and it's sat from behind, or it's not sat behind a corporate firewall, then consider switching on the mobile functionality of that to allow your learners to be able to access content and perhaps even undertake learning whilst they're on the move as well. And then finally, good old-fashioned text messaging, seen as being very retro by some people. I've had some significant success using text messaging in the past to direct a group of learners to particular learning resources, to send out reminders a couple of days before an event that the event is taking place, where it's taking place, if the venue has changed, that they can find out through that route. There can be sent some pre-work to be done or some reminders for the pre-work, and of course after an event as well. It's a great way of keeping in touch with people. Why did I choose that route and not email? Well, because where I used to work had a significant number of shift workers who were unable to access their work emails from home. So in terms of being able to get hold of people in the run-up to an event, particularly for something critical like a cancellation of an event or a relocation, it was critical that I got hold of those people en masse before an event, to prevent any waste of overtime, or to prevent them from coming into work and not realising that the event has moved to a different building. So have a look at text messaging and see whether or not you can put text messaging into your arsenal. Remember, we said at the beginning that I wasn't particularly keen on the word mobile learning, and I just want to stress once more why not. I personally think that what it does is it separates good old-fashioned learning from any other type of learning. I think it puts a ring fence around mobile learning. Now, I don't disagree that there perhaps are different considerations. This particular screencast has hopefully highlighted some of those, but what I would suggest that what we should start to do from this point moving forward is just refer to mobile learning as learning. Thanks ever much for watching this screencast. Hopefully you've got something beneficial from it, and like I said, keep an eye out for some future blog posts from me in the Foot in the Door series, in which I'll be looking at some different apps that you can perhaps get into your organisation under the radar and start to add benefit. Thanks for listening.